Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily. A California couple facing charges for a road rage shooting that left a 6-year-old boy dead. Here's a Tennessee father admits to murdering his 5-year-old autistic son, but was it a false confession?
I got up that morning. I got his clothes, so I put the clothes on the table. I went in there and he was gone.
Author and legal analyst Dan Abrams gives us a sneak preview into his new book on the trial of Jack Ruby, Kennedy's Avenger.
It was the first time a murder that had happened live on television was tried.
Shocking testimony in the trial of millionaire real estate heir charged in the murder of his best friend. What Susan Berman allegedly told her friend after Robert Durst's first wife vanished.
She said she didn't forget me.
Law&Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmire along with Terri Austin. 2 people are behind bars in California charged with killing a 6-year-old boy during a road rage incident. Law&Crime's Angenette Levy is here with more on the arrests, the charges, and more on Aiden Leos. Angenette?
Yeah, Brian, this case has just shaken people from coast to coast. 6-year-old Aiden Leos was shot and killed as his mother drove him to kindergarten.
There are few words to describe the feeling produced by the despicable actions of that day.
Over the last 2 weeks, finding the people who killed Aiden Leos has consumed investigators. Sunday evening, Marcus Anthony Ariz and Win Lee were taken into custody after a 17-day manhunt.
We have recovered what we believe are the weapon and automobile used in the crime.
The California Highway Patrol says Ariz fired a gun from this white Volkswagen as Lee drove along the freeway in Orange County on May 21st. Aiden's mother had previously said a vehicle cut her off. Aiden was in his booster seat in the back seat when he was shot.
Why so much interest in this little boy? And I think I know the answer. It's because it could have happened to any one of us.
Aiden's family remembered the sweet 6-year-old at a memorial service last weekend. His mother, Joanna Clunan, said he was like an angel who wasn't meant for this world.
Throughout his life, he was always smiling and laughing. His eyes would sparkle every time he shared a joke, giggling while awaiting your reaction. He just wanted to make people laugh and feel happy.
Marcus Ariz is now charged with murder and shooting into a vehicle, while his girlfriend, Winnie Lee, is charged with being an accessory after the fact to murder. When she was first arrested, she was being held on a murder charge, but now the DA says he doesn't think they can prove that at this time, so he's going to ask her bail to be reduced from $1 million to less than that. They will ask that Ariz's bail be raised from $1 million to $2 million. Brian?
Thanks, Angenette. Joining us today is civil rights attorney KatherineSmith and Terri Austin. Katie, the gunman, Ariz, is being charged with the murder and discharge of a firearm, and the prosecution has already said they're looking for sentencing enhancements. Break that down for us.
Absolutely, Brian. In every state, there are restrictions on what types of penalties certain crimes carry. For example, murder for a reckless act in California can carry a 7-year state sentence, but with the enhancements, so these add-ons, it can be extended to up to 25 years. And some of these enhancements are, for example, gun enhancements, whether minors were involved, which of course would be applicable here, hate crimes, gang crimes. Of course, not all of these are applicable, but you only need a few to be able to enhance it beyond what would statutorily be required.
Makes sense. Looks like they're really trying to throw the book at him based on not only the crime, but the victim here. Terri, the passenger Lee, though, as you heard from Angenette, is only being charged with accessory after the fact and a misdemeanor. Why do you think she wasn't charged with either accomplice to a murder or even murder as originally was charged?
Well, the lesser charge of accessory after the fact is going to be much easier to prove. The prosecution only has to show that the individual somehow aided the person who actually committed the crime. And under the higher charge of an accomplice liability, the authorities would have to show that the driver had the same sort of knowledge and intent that the shooter actually had. And I think under these circumstances, that's going to be more difficult to prove. So they probably looked at the evidence and decided that they would do the lesser charge.
Makes sense. And Angenette, the DA's office had a presser before the arraignment. What happened there?
Yeah, they talked a lot about just how much the community, the outpouring from the community, really helped solve this case. The news media kept it out there, hoping to help be a part of solving it. And also, there was this huge outpouring from the community in getting the reward money raised to $500,000. They haven't determined just yet who's getting what part of that reward. That kind of is ongoing, sorting all of that out. But they really commended the community for coming together and wanting to find the person or people who did this to young Aiden.
Absolutely. This is really quick thinking and help by the community coming together to find these two. Of course, we're hoping that there can be some justice for Aiden in this case. Thank you, everyone. Still ahead on Law&Crime Daily, Law&Crime's founder Dan Abrams speaks about his new book, Kennedy's Avenger, and the trial of Jack Ruby. But first, was it coerced? The jury in the Joseph Daniels trial hears his confession for the first time. Welcome back. A Tennessee jury is now hearing the alleged confession of a father accused of killing his 5-year-old autistic son, lovingly called Baby Joe. Joseph Ray Daniels reported his 5-year-old Joseph Clyde Daniel as missing on April 4th, 2018. After days of searching, the 31-year-old father admitted to murdering his son. But he later recanted, with his defense team calling the confession coerced. Only 2.5 hours of Daniels' 4-hour interrogation was played in court. Prosecutors say Daniels came to the police station of his own free will and could have left at any time. Before his confession, Daniels told multiple variations of this story.
I got woke up about 11:30 that night, and he peed on the floor. I went to the bedroom. I saw the pee on the floor. The bathroom light was on. So I said, just go ahead and just go back to sleep. And he laid back and went back in the bed and went down. I went back to the bed and went back to sleep. And then sometime during the night, Crystal got up and she went out and checked on him. And then she went back to sleep. I woke up at 5:30, and then...
See, that's when you let stuff out.
This next version is almost identical to what the defense alleges really happened. Daniel says he yelled at the boy for peeing on the floor, then went back to bed.
I got out of bed. I went and got the clothes, Alex and Joe's. I noticed the coffee table had been moved. And then I put the clothes on the coffee table. I didn't look at the door. I went into the room and I saw that Joe was missing. I freaked out. I went and looked through the house first. I got Crystal up to come outside with me to try to find Baby Joe.
Then, Daniels confessed to beating his son to death. He was unable to lead police to Baby Joe's remains, which have never been found yet.
Did you lose track of how many times you hit him?
I don't know how many times.
You just kept hitting?
I beat him. He was laying on the table.
Laying on the table?
Just scratched. He had cut his leg on the table.
He cut his leg on the table when you threw
I
him?
didn't see any blood though. When I woke up that morning, I didn't see any blood.
What made you stop?
When I realized that I lost control.
When did he stop responding?
He didn't stop responding.
He kept screaming the whole time? Anything you feel outside?
Back with us is civil rights attorney KatherineSmith and Terri Austin. Terri, what do you think about the agent's interrogation techniques during the confession?
I actually think it was very effective, Brian, particularly if we look at the end result. They started off asking very broad questions. The very first question was, tell us what happened. And then they sort of went into a more accusatory process. They used a version of the read process, I think, here, where they said specifically, well, so what did you tell Crystal? What did you tell Alex? but they didn't put words in his mouth. So I think at the end of the day, they ended up asking very good questions and they got the confession they needed without actually spoon feeding the defendant.
Now, Katie, the defense is going to point to Daniel's body language, tone, fatigue to show this was a false confession. But do you see any signs of a false confession here?
You know, Brian, it's tough to tell because you really need to look at the video in its totality. For example, where the actual questioners were situated in proximity. You can see how close they were, how closely pressed upon him they were. Obviously, his mental state, and if he does have mental health issues, weighs in favor of coercion. But he does appear to be relatively relaxed. He doesn't appear to be too caged in a corner. That's one thing that we always look at. And he does appear to be feeding relatively consistent information. So I think a lot of this will turn on whether they offer any type of expert about his mental health status.
Yeah, if they're going to argue something along the lines of false confession or coercion that is attached to his mental health, we would expect to see the defense put on a case. What do you think, Terri?
Yeah, I agree. I think they'd have to put something else on the stand to show whether or not he had some mental illness and whether or not this was actually coerced. I think, as we've all said, it was just right there where they got the right information that they needed.
All right, we'll see how this plays out as it continues. Thank you both. Coming up on Law&Crime Daily, if anything happens to me, Bobby did it. The chilling words Susan Berman allegedly told one of her close friends. But plus, we speak with Dan Abrams on his new book about the Kennedy assassination and the trial of Jack Ruby. Stay with us. We're back. A new book is out on the trial of the man who killed President John F. Kennedy's assassin. Our own Jesse Weber spoke with the book's author, who just so happens to be the founder of the Law&Crime Network, Dan Abrams.
Do you remember Jack Ruby, the man who shot Lee Harvey Oswald, the guy that shot President Kennedy? Well, Ruby's incredible trial is the subject of Kennedy's Avenger, Assassination, Conspiracy, and the Forgotten Trial of Jack Ruby, written by ABC chief legal analyst and founder of our very own Law&Crime Network, Dan Abrams. When I was reading this, what amazed me is that if this trial of Ruby aired right now on Law&Crime, it would probably be one of the most watched, talked about, debated trials. It has all of those elements that people are fascinated with, right?
And you know, it almost was televised. It almost became the first mega televised trial. There had been one or two other televised trials, and the defense in this case wanted the case televised. The judge wanted the case televised. The prosecution did not want the case televised. And the judge got so much heat from the local Dallas community begging him not to televise the trial that he ended up effectively, caving. He allowed the verdict to be shown live, but that's it. And look, I think that was a mistake in retrospect. Television was new back then, right? They didn't know as much as we know now. They wouldn't have been able to, have the single camera that we have in courtrooms and be able to ensure that the protocol of the courthouse and the courtroom is exactly as it is with a camera or without a camera. But there were a lot of things that I think it would have helped if the public had been able to see in this case. The public was fascinated with this case in 1964, as you can imagine. This was effectively the Kennedy assassination trial. And a lot of the conspiracy theories that came from the Kennedy assassination were born out of the Ruby trial. Questions that went unanswered, hints and suggestions, the defense saying to the prosecution, we want you to stipulate that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Prosecutors, we're not stipulating anything. Oh, why not? What's the reason? A lot of that kind of stuff happened in the context of this case, but it was truly a fascinating case. And I am embarrassed to say that I really didn't know that much about this case coming into this and was just stunned at how rich the story was.
No, and I feel like there's a lot of people that don't know about it, including Ruby's defense. I mean, if you ask people, do you know what Ruby's defense was? Can you walk us through that? And also, not only what the defense was, wasn't he represented by quite the lawyer, like quite the character lawyer himself?
Yeah, I mean, he was represented by the guy who was probably the best known lawyer in the country at the time. His name was Melvin Belli. He primarily did personal injuries cases, He used a lot of demonstrative evidence. You know, he'd throw things on the floor and do stunts, et cetera. But he'd done some criminal cases, et cetera. And his defense in the Ruby trial was that Jack Ruby did not remember the incident, that he was suffering from a rare form of epilepsy, that he had an epileptic event, and that Jack Ruby didn't remember it happening. And so he didn't understand right from wrong. And therefore, it was an insanity defense. And, you know, studying this case carefully, I think that the better defense would have been the one that he was going to use when he was granted a new trial. And there's another fascinating element to this case, is that the verdict was overturned and he'd gotten the death sentence. He should have just said, yeah, I did it. I did it in the heat of passion. Because you know what? In the state of Texas back then, what was called murder without malice, what we know as manslaughter in most states, up to 5 years. That's it. No more than 5 years in prison is what Jack Ruby could have gotten if he'd gotten this murder without malice.
Incredible trial and a great read. Jack Ruby died before he was able to be retried. The book, Kennedy's Avenger, is now available. When we come back, the eerie last words of the murder victim in the trial of a millionaire real estate heir, Robert Durst. What Susan Berman allegedly told her friend before being shot, next. Welcome back. Jurors in the Robert Durst case are continuing to hear more bombshell testimony in the trial of the millionaire real estate heir charged with murder.
Loyalty was very important to Susan, and she would discuss that with me.
Friends of Susan Berman describe her as vivacious, exuberant, and outgoing. The 55-year-old was gunned down inside her Benedict Canyon, California home in December 2000.
She learned loyalty from her father.
What did you know about her father, if anything?
Well, I knew he was part of the Jewish mafia, and he was from the Midwest, from Minnesota.
After Berman's death, rumors swirled that the shooting could have been a mob hit. But 15 years later, authorities would arrest her best friend, Robert Durst, for her murder.
Well, she adored him. He was everything to her, as far as a friend and my brother.
Barnes says she remembered one day back in 1982, Berman calling her with a sense of urgency, saying she needed to come over to tell her something important.
She said, I'm going to tell you something, but I need you not to ask me any questions.
That's when Barnes says she learned Durst's wife, Kathy, was missing.
And when Susan got nervous, she would pick at her lip. And she said, I did something today, and it didn't bother me. And then her next statement was, if anything ever happens to me, violence did it.
The testimony was recorded in 2017, and both sides stipulated it would come in at trial, rather than having the witnesses travel during the pandemic. Robert Durst, now 78 years old, is standing trial in California. His defense maintains he didn't kill Berman and doesn't know who did. On cross-examination, the defense asked Barnes how she connected Berman's statements that she did something to Kathy's disappearance.
You came to those conclusions through your own supposition, correct?
Yes.
Because Susan never told you.
Never told me what you think.
That Kathy was missing was a result of the call she had allegedly made or done.
No, she did not.
Nor did she tell you that what she had done was a bad thing.
That's true.
And the defense asked Barnes more about what Susan Berman was like as a person.
A lot of issues.
Yes.
Mental breakdowns.
Yes.
Fall apart mentally.
Yes.
And lastly, mental health issues.
I know that she saw a psychiatrist.
On redirect, Barnes says she didn't come forward with what Berman said for 4 decades because she was afraid of Durst after Berman's funeral and after she learned Durst killed and dismembered his neighbor, Morris Black, in Texas.
I was involved, and I tried to not use Bobby's name when I spoke to you. I was editing myself because I was scared.
Katie, what did you make of the defense's cross-examination there? Did this argument that she came up with her own conclusions help the defense?
Absolutely. I mean, that's really the connective tissue here. Nothing that was directly perceived, seen, heard by the witness was directly on point. This was all exactly what the defense attorney said, a supposition that was pieced together. And honestly, that usurps the province of the jury. The jury is the one who's supposed to draw these connective dots. And here the witness is the one who's drawing the dots in this very bombastic evidence. I think that there's a lot of problems with this, and the jury could easily disregard what this witness says.
All right, Terri, put it all together for us. Does this inch the prosecution closer to beyond a reasonable doubt or not?
Well, I agree with Katie. I do think that there's so much doubt as far as this individual is concerned, but it did help the prosecution because basically what you have is someone saying that she was told that Susan Berman did something and that if anything happens to her, it was Bobby. And the real question is, do you believe her? And why did she wait so long? And the fear that she had made complete sense, if you ask me. She sees all these people dying around her. She sees that, Kathy Durst is gone, Morris Black is gone, and obviously Susan Berman is gone. So that put fear in her, and she didn't say anything for many, many years. So I think we will have to see what the jury says. I think the prosecution made some points, but clearly there is doubt here. And I could see the jury going either way.
Yeah, definitely on the fence here. But to your point, Terri, there's a lot of arguments defense attorneys make about late reporting. This one, I think, kind of makes sense as to why someone would wait to report or out of fear, as we understand. Thank you both for contributing, and thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.